Claire from Clarity Horsemanship here to demystify the dressage movements. In my experience teaching, when riders get past the basics and start working on movements, they start getting confused. Where should my weight be for this movement? What about that one? Should I have flexion or not? Why am I trying so hard and not getting any movement from my horse? And then the horse gets confused. If those questions resonate with you, this video will be your friend. I'm going to show you how each movement is built from the ground up, so you aren't confused how to cue a movement anymore. Save it so you can come back. At the end is a cheat sheet of all the movements and how they are built. There's a link in the video description, so you can download it too. Cueing a movement is actually a term that makes it more complicated than it needs to be. There isn't one singular cue for a half pass, or for renvers. Each movement is actually built out of individual responses. If you cue and achieve the individual responses in the right order, you'll have the movement just like that. A horse can go in 4 ways: faster, longer, higher, or up a gait. A horse can stop in 3 ways: slower, shorter, or down a gait. A horse can turn from a direct or indirect rein. A horse can flex and bend laterally. A horse can yield the hindquarters to the side. That's 11 basic responses. Riders start learning 10 of these basics within their first couple of years of riding. Horses learn the same 10 in their first couple years of riding too. Higher steps is usually taught horses and riders once the first 10 are solid and reliable. So if you and your horse have been riding for about 2 years, regularly, learning these 10 basics, you already have the tools you need to ride all the dressage movements through 4th level. So how exactly do these turn into these? All we need to do is dissect which basics are involved and cue them in order, like this. The most basic half halt is made up of only 2 responses. First, the horse is cued to slow. Second, the horse is cued to quicken. It's important to note here, when beginning to combine responses, that responses are never cued simultaneously. It's always one at a time. But each response can be cued quite close together, even as close as half a step apart if the horse is responding that quickly. Let's look at another combination. Using flexion, turn, and yield, a rider can build a shoulder in, haunches in, renvers, or half pass. The difference is in what order the rider cues those 3 basics. So, to ride a movement, all you need to know is how it is supposed to look in the end. Then you can pick out what basics you need to cue and build the movement. Here's the chart I promised. I'll show you how to use it. You'll see the 11 basics listed on the left side. Only 3 movements that I listed use the higher steps, so you can get started right away. Extensions are the easiest. Only 1 basic response is needed, which is longer strides. There's the half halt I mentioned. First we slow, then we quicken. Let's look at the difference in cue order that creates the difference between shoulder in, haunches in, and renvers. Shoulder in. First we cue lateral flexion. Second, we cue the turn of the forelegs. And lastly, we move the hindquarters over. How about haunches in? First, again, we cue lateral flexion, but second, we move the hind legs over. And lastly, we keep the forelegs on our line. What about renvers? Renvers and shoulder in are very similar. First we start the lateral flexion, then we turn the forelegs, then we yield the hindquarters. The difference between renvers and shoulder in is where they are placed in the arena. Half pass adds just one more thing to the mix: longer strides. First we start with flexion, then we turn the forelegs as if we were starting a shoulder in, yield the hindquarters, and then we go longer. The most complicated movement is the canter pirouette, which uses 5 of the 11 basics listed. No stars this time. See if you can follow along. First, in the canter, we shorten the stride. From the shorter stride, we ask for higher steps. We have a short, high canter. We increase the flexion in preparation for the direction of the turn, and begin yielding the hindquarters slightly towards our flexion. This will look and feel slightly like a half pass, but it is missing the longer strides of the half pass. Finally, the indirect turn moves the shoulders around the pirouette turn. You can imagine when training a horse to perform a canter pirouette, each response is added gradually. The rider practices shortening and lengthening the canter. When that is easy, he can add shortening and heightening the steps, then lengthening again. When that is easy, he adds shorter, higher, and increased flexion. The horse now has the strength to sustain a shorter, higher canter for a longer period of time, thanks to all the practice of shortening and extending the canter. The yield added to the mix gives him a sort of half-pass, but it doesn't meet all the criteria of half-pass as the strides are very short and high. The movement only begins to look like a pirouette, or anything at all really, once he arrives at the last step of adding the turn of the shoulders. However, the horse has been thoroughly prepared by adding only one step at a time, building the movement from the ground up. If you want a copy of this chart for your own study, I've put a link where you can download it in the video description. Sure, you say. Sounds easy enough. No, it actually is. I trained Tesla to perform all of these movements before I ever rode them on a trained horse. It is definitely easier to train other horses the movements now that I know what the finished product feels like, but don't let lack of access to an expensive horse limit your dressage ability. Which of the movements has been the most mystifying to you? I can make a whole video for one movement. Let me know which one it should be in the comments.